A technique I use a lot, but I rarely practice, is legato. So I'm intending to correct that over the next few weeks. Now I like to look inside a technique like legato and see what's going on under the hood. And when I do that, I see what I call movement cadences, which are all sort of left-hand based. And the two most common ones that I see when I'm playing legato are what I call two-note cadences and three-note cadences. The two-note variant is what you see when you're doing a trill or you're playing pentatonics, you know. So you can see it's alternating between one finger and the next and then recycling. So that's a two-note cadence. And the three-note cadence is what you get when you're playing a major scale or a minor scale. So basically the movement recycles every three notes. So what I'm going to do this week is just focus on the three-note version, and then maybe at another time we'll go on to the two-note version. So when you look inside these three-note versions, you'll see that they're actually only sort of two primary movements, two essential movements that are associated with playing three notes. As long as you don't allow repeated notes, and you can't really play repeated notes when you're doing legato. It doesn't really work. And if you look at them, every combination of three notes actually boils down to two different essential patterns, which are this is an ascending version, and there's a descending version. And then of those two essential movements, there's sort of three variations depending on whether you start with your index finger, or you start with your middle finger, or you start with your third finger. Yeah, so those are the three versions of the ascending pattern, and the descending pattern you start with your little finger or your third finger, you start with your middle finger, or you start with your index finger. So that gives you 6 patterns. And I'll write them down in the description just so you've got them to hand, but they're really easy to work out, as you've just seen. But these 6 patterns occur with surprising regularity in legato lines that you play. So even when you're playing, I don't know, 16th note lines, for example, descending and ascending fours. If you look at what's going on in that pattern, you've got 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Can you see? It's just 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1 in terms of the left hand movement. Or, you know, pick another pattern. So what's that? That's 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Yeah? So even though these seem really simple things, they actually appear an awful lot in the lines that we play as guitarists, which is why it's worth just focusing on these and getting these under your fingers. And so what I want to do this week is give you a set of exercises that will let you do this. So let's start with what I consider to be my favourite exercise when I'm working on these kinds of legato lines. Let's zoom in and I'll demonstrate. Okay, so let's start with an exercise. This is something that I do all the time when I'm working on this kind of thing. So it's a really simple pattern based on 3 notes per string scales. So if I play in B major, there's my B root. There's the scale that I'm playing, the scale position that I'm going to be working in, okay? And all I do is I'll just pick one of the patterns. Let's say it's the first primary pattern, so that's ascending 3 notes. And all I do is I take it across 3 strings, like that, yeah? And then I reset back a set of strings. And reset, reset. And that's taken me all the way across the neck, and then coming back the other way I use the same pattern still. Okay, so So if I play through that, we have this. So that's the first primary pattern, and of course I can use any of the others. So if I use a second one, and of course I can use any of the 3 notes per string scales. So those are the 2 primary patterns that you've really got to get under your fingers. And then it's worth start looking at the variations, and the variations can be really quite tricky. So let's have a look at a couple of those as well. So the first variation of that ascending pattern is to start with your middle finger. So you get that kind of shape. And you just take that across the 3 strings just like before. And then reset. Keep resetting. And then coming back the other way. And I can feel that really challenging me, so that's one that I'd work on, definitely. And so, you know, there are 6 variations of this, so I'll work through all 6 until I've got them all fluid under my fingers. Now when you're working with 3 notes per string scale shapes, all 7 of them going up the neck, you'll find there's an awful lot of combinations of fingers and strings and transitions that you have to work through. There's a really useful hack that kind of boils all this down to sort of the essential movements. And let me just demonstrate that right now. So there's an interesting property of the D, the G and the B strings. I'll not go into the detail of why this is the case, but you'll find when you're working with the D, the G and the B strings, these contain all of the 3 note per string pairs that you'll ever encounter when you're playing, you know, the major or the minor 3 notes per string position. So if you can play these 3 strings fluently, then you'll find you've got motor skills that will transition across to the other strings as well. And so that gives you something that you can just focus on, just focusing on 3 strings rather than all 6 when you're working on these shapes. So what I like to do actually is I like to sort of challenge myself, because I don't change key that often in the style of music that I play, certainly within the songs. So what I'll do is I'll pick a root note and I'll say let's play all of the minor variations working on each position. So let's see what I mean by that. So if I make that my root, so I'll play all of the minor variations with that root. And there's a pattern I use. And obviously it can be any of the 3 note variations that we've been talking about. And then I'll say, okay, what about if that was a root note? What would it look like? And the shape changes to that. Or if that was a root note. Or if that was a root note. Make that the root note. Make that the root note. Yeah, make that the root note. Okay, so it's just a different way of thinking about the neck, thinking about where the root notes are. But as I say, we're working on these inner strings. Finally, there's a couple of variations of legato that I like to work on when I'm doing this kind of practice. So let's drill down to those. Okay, so far I've been using what I call a traditional technique, which is where you pick every new string with your pick. So a different approach, which is really quite useful to understand, is to not pick every note, to activate the string with the left hand as well. So you do that with hammer-ons. So the right hand is involved, but the right hand's controlling string noise. So as your left hand moves onto the next string, your right hand just moves and covers the previous string, yeah, just stops it sounding. And obviously you can go both ways. And this is fun to sort of experiment with, where instead of religiously picking every note, you use the pick now for punctuation, so you can sort of pick the first note of a group of 6. So the pick now is used for emphasis and not used for technical reasons, which I find really quite fun. Now this stuff is tough. It's going to take you a few weeks or maybe a few months to really get fluent with all of these 6 shapes and all of the 3 notes per string scale shapes going up and down the neck as well. If you're struggling with understanding how the 3 notes per string scale shapes work, then I'd recommend you check out my deep dive series, because that really breaks these shapes down and gives you skills, gives you useful tools for memorizing all of this stuff. So try that out. If you're new to my channel and you want more sort of technique ideas, more music theory ideas, then consider subscribing to me. Otherwise, we'll chat next time. Goodbye.